2001 attacks, that this complication calls for a new nuclear strategy, one that is distinct from that which gave relative stability during the Cold War. Since 1996, the United States has had a policy of allowing the targeting of its nuclear weapons at terrorists armed with weapons of mass destruction. Robert Gallucci argues that although traditional deterrence is not an effective approach toward terrorist groups bent on causing a nuclear catastrophe, Gallucci believes that the United States should instead consider a policy of expanded deterrence, which focuses not solely on the would-be nuclear terrorists, but on those states that may deliberately transfer or inadvertently leak nuclear weapons and materials to them. By threatening retaliation against those states, the United States may be able to deter that which it cannot physically prevent. Graham Allison makes a similar case, arguing that the key to expanded deterrence is coming up with ways of tracing nuclear material to the country that forged the fissile material. After a nuclear bomb detonates, nuclear forensics cops would collect debris samples and send them to a laboratory for radiological analysis. By identifying unique attributes of the fissile material, including its impurities and contaminants, one could trace the path back to its origin. The process is analogous to identifying a criminal by fingerprints. The goal would be twofold. First, to deter leaders of nuclear states from selling weapons to terrorists by holding them accountable for any use of their weapons. Second, to give leaders every incentive to tightly secure their nuclear weapons and materials. According to the Pentagon's June 2019 Doctrine for Joint Nuclear Operations of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's website, publication, integration of nuclear weapons employment with conventional and special operations forces is essential to the success of any mission or operation. Governance, control, and law. Because they are weapons of mass destruction, the proliferation and possible use of nuclear weapons are important issues in international relations and diplomacy. In most countries, the use of nuclear force can only be authorized by the head of government or head of state. Despite controls and regulations governing nuclear weapons, there is an inherent danger of accidents, mistakes, false alarms, blackmail, theft, and sabotage. In the late 1940s, lack of mutual trust prevented the United States and the Soviet Union from making progress on arms control agreements. The Russell-Einstein Manifesto was issued in London on July 9, 1955, by Bertrand Russell in the midst of the Cold War. It highlighted the dangers posed by nuclear weapons and called for world leaders to seek peaceful resolutions to international conflict. The signatories included 11 preeminent intellectuals and scientists, including Albert Einstein, who signed it just days before his death on April 18, 1955. A few days after the release, philanthropist Cyrus S. Eaton offered to sponsor a conference called for in the manifesto in Pugwash, Nova Scotia, Eaton's birthplace. This conference was to be the first of the Pugwash Conferences on Science and World Affairs, held in July 1957. By the 1960s, steps were taken to limit both the proliferation of nuclear weapons to other countries and the environmental effects of nuclear testing. The Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, 1963, restricted all nuclear testing to underground nuclear testing to prevent contamination from nuclear fallout, whereas the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, 1968, attempted to place restrictions on the types of activities signatories could participate in, with the goal of allowing the transference of non-military nuclear technology to member countries without fear of proliferation. In 1957, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, was established under the mandate of the United Nations to encourage development of peaceful applications of nuclear technology, provide international safeguards against its misuse, and facilitate the application of safety measures in its use. In 1996, many nations signed the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which prohibits all testing of nuclear weapons. A testing ban imposes a significant hindrance to nuclear arms development by any complying country. The treaty requires the ratification by 44 specific states before it can go into force. As of 2012, the ratification of 8 of these states is still required. Additional treaties and agreements have governed nuclear weapons stockpiles between the countries, with the 2 largest stockpiles, the United States and the Soviet Union, and later between the United States and Russia. These include treaties such as SALT II, never ratified, START I, expired, ENF, START II, never in effect, SORT, and New START, as well as non-binding agreements such as SALT UN and the Presidential Nuclear Initiatives of 1991. Even when they did not enter into force, these agreements helped limit and later reduce the numbers and types of nuclear weapons between the United States and the Soviet Union, Russia. Nuclear weapons have also been opposed by agreements between countries. Many nations have been declared nuclear weapon-free zones, areas where nuclear weapons production and deployment are prohibited through the use of treaties. The Treaty of Tlatelolco, 1967, prohibited any production or deployment of nuclear weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Treaty of Pelindaba, 1964, prohibits nuclear weapons in many African countries. As recently as 2006, a Central Asian nuclear weapon-free zone was established among the former Soviet republics of Central Asia, prohibiting